Hello, in this video, I'll introduce you to creating classes in JavaScript and the basic concepts of object-oriented programming in JavaScript. By the end of this video, you should learn something new about classes in JavaScript. Let's begin now. Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to guide you on 11 or about 10 principles that you need to learn about using classes in JavaScript. This is a beginner-friendly introduction to object-oriented programming in JavaScript that's going to give you the concepts that you need to learn in object-oriented. This also applies across most object-oriented programming. In the past, I've written code in other languages, and mostly these principles are going to be similar, and you're going to borrow from one another, especially the general things like declaring classes, inheritance, polymorphism, and encapsulation. So let's begin by first listing the things that we're going to cover in this tutorial. The first is going to, of course, be declaration of a class. The second will be the constructor method. Then the third will be properties, the class properties. Then once we talk about properties, we look at methods. Then the fifth will be instantiation or creating the object. Then the sixth will be accessing properties. Then the seventh will, of course, be inheritance. We cannot talk about classes and not talk about inheritance. Then the eighth concept is adding new properties. And in this context, we are talking of the subclass or the child class. Then the ninth concept we are going to look at is overriding. This can be methods of the parent. Then the 10th concept we're going to talk about is the super method that we use in the child class or subclass. Then the last is the operator instance of. This is used to check if a certain object is an instance of a specific class. These are just the beginning of object-oriented, but if you understand these 10 or 11 principles, you can be good with working with most basic JavaScript object-oriented. I'd like to begin with the first one, which is declaration of a class. Declare a class in JavaScript. We use the keyword class, then the name of the class. For example, I can do a person, then curly brackets. That's how you declare a class in JavaScript. Then we can now call this class once we instantiate it by creating a constant here, person, which will be equal to new. Then we get this name of that class and the brackets to pass in the parameters. So that's the declaration of a class. The second thing is a constructor method. The constructor method in a class allow us to create like the initial properties of this class. So we declare the class as a person. Then in here, we create a constructor. The constructor takes in properties like it can take in a name and an address. Since it's a method, it's a function, then in here we can do something like this. We make reference to the class, this name, this dot name is equal to name. Then we make reference again to the class, this dot address is equal to address. So that's what a constructor method is. It's the first method that is used to initialize a class with its properties. The third concept is properties. Of course, we've discussed properties here along with the constructor methods. So these properties, once we instantiate a class, I would like to copy this. So here we are talking about the third thing, which is the properties. For properties, we've passed the name and address. Think about this as variables. Then we have used the instance of this class to instantiate them so that like they are accessible here. So once we instantiate and pass here, we can now pass the name as a string, Joe. Then we can pass in the location or the address. Then once we do that, we can now access these properties. by simply doing something like person dot. Now we use this property name, then we can just log this. So this person object has this property name, and we've given it as that, so we can log that, and it logs the name as well as the address is going to log the address. So outside the class, once we instantiate the class, we are able to access these properties of this particular class. So that's the concept of properties. So we've looked at declaring a class, then we looked at the constructor method, then we looked at properties. Let's create something to separate them so that we can quickly look back and see the difference. So, and these would be also here. Then we would like to, before we comment out that, we need to separate here and here. Then I'll copy this so that you can move to the next one. And the next one is methods. Methods are functions that are used within a class. Let me comment out this class. And you can always access this code. If you'd like to make reference to this code, you can access it on the link in the description. It's linked to my GitHub account. So for the methods, this is the fourth concept. The methods, we can create a function in here. Suppose this person, we would like to get the name of this person. We can do something like get name, which is a function, and in classes we call functions methods. Then you can say console.log, then we log this. We reference to the instance of the class this dot the name, which we are passing here in this constructor method. So outside here, if I instantiate this object, if I create a new person object, then I can change this to Utopia. Then I can change this to so that I illustrate what it means. So we would like to use this method outside here. First, you need to instantiate the class. Then once you instantiate the class, you can call it like person dot get name, and then you call it like a normal function. So, and it's going to log the name of that person or which you passed here. So it's simply a method, a function that gets the name. We can create another one like get address, which will return this instance of this class, then the address. So outside here, we can still access the same. So we can do person dot get address, and we have the method working outside the class. So let me comment out this. We can change this to new Utopia, and we are now in the new Utopia. So that's our address. So basically, methods are functions that are used in the class, but they're used in that manner. So let me move to the fifth concept of classes. It's instantiation. From that instant, creating an object. So this is simply what I've been doing down here. This is how we instantiate a class. Then I would like to just separate it, then copy that code again. And as always, you can get this code on GitHub for you to try it out. And again, we have the class here with the name person. Then we have a constructor class. Then we have two methods inside this class. Then at this particular point, this is where creating an object occurs. We use a keyword that we're going to use to reference that class as we're accessing the properties and the methods. Then we use the word new, and then we reference to the class, this class name here. Then we add curly brackets to pass in the constructor variables. So then we can change this to the next Utopia. Then we change this to Smith. Then after we instantiate a class, we can call this new person. Once we instantiate a new person, we can now access the methods. Again, we can do name, then we log this. It's going to log Smith. This is going to log Smith because that's a new variable or class property that we are passing here. Then the address will log the next Utopia. So once we log that, it's going to give us next utopia. So what's simply happening? We are creating a class, then we are creating a constructor function, and this constructor function takes into two parameters, which we call properties in a class. Then in here we are referencing the same, but using this keyword is used to reference to this specific class. Then down here we have a method, and again we are referencing to this .name, which we passed here to use this method. Then address is referencing this .address. Down here we are instantiating the class. This process of instantiating a class is creating the class. Then once we create a class, it has now the methods available for us to manipulate the data. So I would like to move to the next one. The next one is going to be accessing properties. I've already explained accessing properties in details, like the way I have accessed this new person, so that there's no point of repeating that particular point. Then the other concept is, the seventh concept is inheritance. So inheritance works like this. We have a parent class here. So this is a parent class. And sometimes we will call it superclass. Not sometimes. In JavaScript, we call it superclass. This class, we can inherit it. We can create a child class down here that is similar to this class, but now we'll call it a subclass or a child class. This class can be a different class, so we are going to give it the name customer. And now this customer has a constructor method. Then this constructor method can have default parameters like the name. If the name of the customer is not set, so we'll just say customer. Then the address, if the address is not set, we'll have a default address. We can give it Utopia. So that's going to be our default variables for this. Then the same way we are going to go through, we just do the same way, but in here we have another method we call super. This super can take in the name and the address, but for the sake of clarity, we can change this address to location. Once we change this to location, we can now pass in here, we can get rid of this and pass this location to our super method. So we are creating a constructor method, then giving it default values, which is customer. Then we are giving this, we can call it, instead of Utopia, we call it some new city. So this one you can just call it Nairobi. So that's the default city or location for this customer location property. So this super method allows us to inherit, like it's going to inherit from the parent, this from the parent. Then we have created a new one here. So this new location is what we need to change here. So this can be location, will be equal to location. Then we now need to create new methods, or we can override the older methods, like we had get name here. So since this was name, we can add an extra thing here, like to override that method. So you remember here we are doing console log.name. So this is the parent method. So in here we can override this same method. We can define it. Then instead of this .name, we are going to log. We use temporal literals or the backtick syntax to output something here. So we do, and then new overridden. Then we pass. We just say overridden. Then we just wrap this in a. There's something wrong here, so we need to. This needs to be in here. Then we do this dot name. That's how it's supposed to be. This is going to show us, once we reference this method, we are going to test and see like this is the method that is running. It has the same name. Then we can change this method to something else, like deliver, a new method. Deliver, then we can say deliver to, then we copy this address. but now this should not be address. This should be location, delivered to this location. So far, so good. We have created a subclass, and this subclass has the super method that gets properties from the parent. Then it has a location, a new property. Then we have added, we have overridden. This method is parent method. Parent, it should be parent class method. Then this is a new method we introduced for this. That's a new method we introduced for this subclass. So that's how, then of course this is a constructor. But now this class cannot work unless we use the extend keyword. So we need to do extends, then person. We are creating a parent class, then this parent class, this customer class extends the person class. So then we can add a constructor, then inside the constructor a super method, then get the name is overridden, then the new method. So down here we cannot do a const, then we get a customer who will be equal to new, the keyword new to instantiate, then we use the customer. Then this new customer will be, we look for a new name. But since we set the default, you remember we set here the default, like if we just call this without passing any variables or parameters in here, it's going to print out the object along with the data, the default data. So the same way, if we would extend this and just do one of the methods like location, so we can do dot location, and it's going to give us Nairobi, which is the default here that we have set. Then for name, which is the default, it's going to give us customer, since we've set the default here. We can as well pass in our variables or our data, like if we passed Joe, then it's going to give us that name. Then if we pass the location as, then we access the location, it's going to give us Utopia again. We have extended the parent class, then used the extend class, then we used the super constructor method to inherit the parents properties to the child. Then we defined the new methods. So I would like us to access the methods now. So I'll simply instantiate an empty class without these parameters. Then I would like to get hold of this method to see if we've successfully overridden this method. So what I will do, I'll just copy it. Then I'll say customer object dot get name. So it's supposed to give us the name customer here. We can say, we can change this name to something else, something cool, another cool name here. So, and it gives us that overridden, and it means it has been overridden. Then we are getting some undefined thing here. What's undefined? This should be something that's not working. So let's find out. Let's log out this first and save. So it means there is an element of undefined here. We need to find what could be causing that undefined. So I guess what's causing that undefined has something to do with this line, because if we just comment out that line, the undefined is gone. So what's wrong with this line? Let's take it step by step. First, when you're debugging, you need to look at the line of code. So we uncomment this first. Then the console provides you with a lot of details, like you can see the object and the methods here. So nothing seems amiss, but we can always move back to the console and look at the line of code that's giving us undefined. And the line is 187. You hover over this and it's 187. 187 is this line. So it means there's something wrong with this. We can explicitly say that this line has nothing, has no problem. So even if we changed this to name, then we change this to something like customer name is. So it still gives us customer name is, then it gives us undefined. So we carefully look, and I can already see the problem. The problem is console logging what I've already console logged here. So this I should simply call the method. That's a good point. So that undefined should disappear. So you should, once you access the object method, you should simply call the method. So that's what was causing that issue. What we can learn from that is you can override a method. Then we can now test the new method to see customer.deliver and deliver to that. Then we can pass in a new address here or location, new utopia. So, and deliver that to the new utopia. So that's our deliver message. So in here, we looked at uh, nearly all the concepts that we outlined. We looked at the super method, we looked at overriding, we've looked at adding new properties and inheritance. So what we need to pay attention to complete this is instance of. But I would like to emphasize on adding new properties on the inherited class. So in this class, we did not have location, but now on this extended class, which is a subclass, we have location. So it's possible to add new location to your child class. Finally, there is an operator which is called instance of. Instance of gives us the instance of a class. We use it to check if that's an instance of a class. Suppose we create a new constant here, then new customer. Then we just use the same. This should be equal to. We can just, instead of new customer, we call them some customers. So some customer that we don't know. Then we'd like to know if this instance, it's the instance of the class. So we can do console.log. Then we say customer, some customer. We're simply asking, is this the instance of this customer class? If that's the case, this should return to true, and it returns to true. So instance of is an operator you used to determine if this is the instance, this particular object is the instance of the class that you are looking for. Like if the class is customer, you use the instance of operator to check, is that object the instance of that class? So that's how we use this last instance of operator. So I guess by now you've learned something new, and if you've watched up to this point, you must be liking this video. If you did, kindly consider giving this video a thumbs up to help with the YouTube algorithm, as well as subscribing to this channel. Thank you for your time. By the end of this video, I'm sure you can now comfortably create classes in JavaScript. If you learned something new, kindly consider giving this video a thumbs up and do not forget to subscribe. Thank you and see you in the next video.